Hello and welcome back to our 8th Streaming Media Connect. Hope some of you have made some of our previous panels yesterday and earlier today. We're really excited to be able to offer these virtual events in addition to our in-person events. We're doing 2 of each every year now, and our next in-person event is all set. Streaming Media West will be in Huntington Beach in November. The program is online now, and Steve Nathans-Kelly, our producer, will pop the URL so you can check out the program after the panel, of course, and see what we'll be offering there. Registration is open, and if you're interested in speaking, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I can tell you a little bit more about that. I'm Eric Schumacher-Rasmussen. I am the conference chair for streaming media events, and I'm also the CMO of Ideas. Before we jump into our discussion, just a few housekeeping notes. Just for being here, you're entered into a drawing to win an Amazon gift card. We'll announce the winner of that drawing at the end of this session, and you must be present to win. If you have questions for our panel, please enter them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Just click on Q&A and a window will pop open and you can enter the questions there. That just makes it easier for your moderator, i.e. me, excuse me, to keep track of those questions as they come in rather than if they are entered into the chat window. Subtitles, you'll notice, are turned on, or they perhaps are showing up on your screen. They don't always show up on everyone's screen. If you want to turn them off, you can go to the bottom of your Zoom window, click on Live Transcript, and then select Disable Transcript, and that will turn them off. And finally, all of the Streaming Media Connect sessions will be available on demand starting next Monday at our YouTube channel. And Steve has, again, popped that URL into the chat. I'd like to thank our diamond sponsor, Media Silo, for helping us bring you all of the sessions this week. And we have a brief video message from them right now. And I would also like to thank the sponsor of this panel, Signiant. For the next hour or so, we're going to be talking about one of those evergreen topics in the world of streaming media, and that's cloud versus hybrid versus on-prem. We've got a great group of panelists, and rather than me introducing them, I'd like them all to introduce themselves. So panelists, please turn your cameras on and your mics, and we'll start with Michael from Warner Brothers Discovery. And rather than just introduce who you are and what you do that, of course, but also please just let our audience know where your organization is at in the cloud versus on-prem versus hybrid continuum. Michael.
Sure, Eric. Yeah, so I'm SVP of Digital Media Systems, and I work within the Media Technology and Operations Group at Warner Brothers Discovery. And specifically, I'm responsible for our production technology strategy as well as post-production engineering. And, within WBD, we're on a pretty aggressive cloud adoption path. That includes moving a significant portion of what is currently in our CNN Center facility to the cloud. So as we get our whole group together at our other facility, our campus in Atlanta, a significant amount of stuff doesn't have to move. So that entire facility is going into the cloud to a large degree. Also, we've got close to 200 post-production editors working in the cloud every day right now as their primary workflow. And a significant amount of our master control also is running out of the cloud. So it's there's a lot there and big plans over the next couple of years to put even more.
Thanks so much. I like how quickly you've adopted and eased into that WBD shorthand, by the way. Next up, Corey Smith from Paramount. Corey.
Hi, my name is Corey Smith. I'm a senior director here for the CBS Sports and Digital Group. I'm focusing more or less on the advanced production technology areas of our business, which is primarily focusing on building more of our hybrid strategy for cloud-based television production. I previously was at Activision Blizzard. We did a lot of stuff in cloud there because it was kind of part of our general technology advancement. But we're very much a hybrid operation here at Paramount.
All right, next up, Jeff Keithley from LiveSports. Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff Keithley. I'm from Texas, as where we're based out of, but as you can tell, I'm actually traveling as usual. With our sporting events back to normal, or more so, as we have been in the past. Now we've basically recovered from most of the things that put everything on pause during COVID and all. But before COVID, we were actually working a lot of our same way that we're back to working now, which is a lot of distributed production, cloud production, and hybrid both. So we really have kind of a wide mix across all three of the major topics that we're talking about today. Our commitment has always been about distributed workflow, more so than just one place or the other, doing everything in the cloud as a REMI type approach, or to do everything at a master control. We try to be flexible, and we work between the events that we do. We work in multiple different ways, but our big part is distributed workflow, without a doubt, with cloud being a big part of that.
All right. And Jeff, I don't think you've ever spoken on one of our events from your home base in Texas. So also, real quick, if you could try to speak up a little bit, your audio is a little low in the future. And so let's close things off with the introductions with Rick Clarkson from Signiant. Rick.
Thanks, Eric. Great to be here. My name is Rick Clarkson. I'm the Chief Product Officer with Signiant. As some of you may know, we're a software vendor in this industry. So my role is I lead a management team, a product management team, and we're really sort of the bridge between the market and the customer base and the developers. So we define what it is we're going to build. In terms of Signiant, from a company standpoint, we are all in terms of moving to cloud. We have all of our new product offerings, and even some of our existing ones, we're converting all to a SaaS offering. So it's all cloud-based, but we feel it's a pretty unique design, which allows our customers to store their content on-premise or in the cloud, but we're running under a SaaS service. We've recently done 2 acquisitions within the last year. We purchased a company in Germany, a company by the name of Les Payne, and we're starting to bring those products to market. We actually started last month, a product called Media Engine, and we purchased a second company called Reach Engine. We purchased them earlier this year, and we're integrating their technology into our platform. So a lot of things happening here, and we're really excited to speak with everyone here today. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Rick. And let's stick with you for this next one. There's that meme, or you can even get a t-shirt that says the cloud is just someone else's computer. But cloud can mean different things to different people. How do we define cloud? How do you define cloud, Rick?
Wow, that's a tough one. Cloud can be, so we sort of break them into 2 different categories. We think of public cloud. There's multiple public clouds, but when we talk about public cloud, we're really thinking about AWS, Azure, and Google. So that's who we really feel are the big public cloud vendors. And then you have private clouds, right? There's dozens and dozens of private clouds that can be hosted on your own premise. They could be hosted in a co-location. And the way we look at private clouds is they're really using the same or very similar cloud technology that the publics are using. The real difference is you have to manage them yourself. So you need to have your staff, you need to have your IT teams, you need to back things up, you need to make sure things are built for scale. So it's really customer decision in terms of what they want to use. Some of them could be security reasons, some of them could be interested in more of a fixed price versus something that's a scalable price. So we really put them in those 2 buckets.
All right. Anyone have any other definitions they want to add in? Michael.
Yeah, I would just say that, one of the key, I think, differentiators with cloud versus just any other virtualized infrastructure that we work on is, the automation and the dynamic nature of it, to be able to, spin up, spin down. I think we have a lot of fixed install VM environments where we could probably achieve some of that same kind of, software defined environment. But, that environment is something that we're on the hook for. We paid for it. And so I think that the consumption nature of cloud is kind of the really defining factor for us and why we're in it.
I would agree definitely on the amount of times that we've had larger events that we are supporting, like for Zoom meetings, multiple Zoom meetings. Like one just recently, we had over 100 different meetings running. I couldn't go to Best Buy or even call Dell and say, I need 100 computers next week. I could do that with cloud though, and it's a beautiful thing for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that we're primarily focusing on right now is actually using cloud and the idea of hybrid to actually extend our physical footprint in our production studios today, because we are not going to grow into more real estate, right? We're not going to, turn around a budget next year and build, 15 more production control rooms. That's just not something that I think that a lot of people are doing from a budgetary perspective anymore. So cloud has really allowed us to change the focus of where we spend our money, how we focus those dollars in a much more optimized and efficient manner to get the best kind of product we can to air.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at the way production works, we're highly event driven or schedule driven a lot of times for live, and so that lends itself really well to something like cloud, where you pay for the hours you use, and if you have a control room that might be dark for some part of the day, or a truck or anything like that, those dollars are kind of you don't want to put more dark infrastructure into that if you can avoid it, and so that's where the hybrid thing really is great. You can. Some parts you can't always put all in the cloud, but the parts you can, now it's on, you pay on demand. It's really cool.
Well, let's keep talking about hybrid and keep talking definitions. Corey, maybe you can take this one. What does hybrid mean for most people, and what are some of the challenges involved with implementing hybrid workflows?
Well, I think that most people kind of already have a sense of what hybrid means in their particular world. For us, it's basically extending our physical world to our virtual world and extending out those capabilities. So it's one cohesive unit. So regardless of all of our production facilities that we have, they're all tied in. Cloud is just a fourth facility, if you will. And so for us, and I think for a lot of people, moving into cloud is really kind of like executing workflow management and orchestration of moving kind of what you would have in a facility somewhere and getting the cloud and the robots to help you out, more efficiently. And so in a world where, you don't have to continue spending, the CapEx every 3 years on upgrading equipment, you can do as a software defined service now within minutes in cloud. So it's much more of a, optimized roadmap for getting, your editors to cloud, that your contribution can now come from anywhere in the world. So from a television-based production platform, you can hire talent from anywhere in the world. So it really does open up a lot of opportunities that your physical space is kind of still constrained in. So cloud allows people to kind of scale their operations much faster.
I would agree about that on the world side of things. It's the other little group that we're part of, a couple of my guys are part of, and I have been part of since the beginning of COVID, was office hours. And I've met people all over the country, all over the world for that matter. So recently I had this big, large event that we did. I put a call out. I had people from Australia. I had 2 people from Australia, 1 person from Dubai, 1 person from India that all signed up to work. And that's just amazing. I never would have had that ever happen before. And it was flawless, no issues at all. They had the same interfaces that we had here in Texas and in Vegas and in New York, where we were all based at. No problems at all. They worked just as if they were next door to us in the backside of a truck or whatever. And that's the part that makes the distributed workflow and cloud and hybrid just work the way it should.
It's interesting to hear Corey and Jeff. It's actually great. It confirms everything that we're hearing as well. They're not one-offs. We're hearing this throughout the market. And we took all these sort of things into account when we built our product suite, because we knew we're going to be in a hybrid world. And yes, we're seeing a lot more cloud adoption. We're seeing, that growing, but we're not seeing the on-premise stuff go away. we're seeing a real mix for that. And we think it's important that from a product company that we can provide the same experience, sort of as Jeff was saying, we can provide the same experience if somebody's using some technology that's located on-prem in your data center or a cloud that's located, 5,000 miles away. We can give them that same experience. And I think that's important. The end user or even the systems that have to use it, you don't want to have to do something special because it's cloud or something special because it's on-premise. It needs to be the same experience. And that's what we've really been focused on.
I agree. But it's important to call out too that from our perspective, and I think a lot of broadcasters' perspective, is the ground-based operations aren't going away. You're not going to get rid of your studio operations. You're not going to get rid of, some of the workflow management that you have with editors and other folks on staff that are creating content packages for your on-air broadcast, whether you're news or sports, it doesn't really matter. A lot of those same things will continue to exist. We're just trying to be hyper focused on the workflows that make sense to move to cloud. Does master control really need to have a full built, hardware platform in a room somewhere in a building? A lot of that stuff is so sophisticated these days and getting more and more so, month after month, that it's very capable now of taking your whole master control operations, graphics, packaging, distribution, and pushing all of that stuff to the cloud. So now you're also freeing up space to be more creative in your physical environment.
I think that kind of one thing that happened with us is that, throughout the period of COVID, when we were doing work from home, people were willing to accept some things that they probably weren't in a typical production environment, and so they got accustomed to those remote workflows. And now as we're going back to facility, we're thinking, hey, people are kind of coming in to do things like maybe finish their edit, but not do the whole edit there, right? So they work from home 2 days, and then they come into the office, and then they finish their edit in a suite with high-end monitoring, and they use it for that. So it's and the facility itself now doesn't even have a computer in the edit suite, right? It's a zero client pointing back up to the cloud to the same machine they were working on when they were at home, and so it's changed the way we work at home. It's changed the configuration of our office infrastructure, and it's changed the way we use our fixed locations, and actually made them a lot more efficient. Because now if I'm doing shared edit suites instead of people treating them like offices, people can book in a couple days a week, and I can make them go a lot farther than I could before.
That's a great. Corey, did you have something to add to that?
No, I was just gonna comment again on what Micah was saying. Giving your workforce the flexibility to be creative, but at the same time not force them into an office space, actually leads to higher productivity, in my opinion. At least what I've seen over the course of the pandemic, us all working from home, trying to get our product back on the air, that kind of thing. You get a lot more efficiency when people are comfortable working in their space, and you give them the tools to be able to, not have to be constrained in any way, shape, or form.
And that's a really good lead into our next question. And Rick, let's start with you on this. Over the last 2.5 years, for obvious reasons, the industry has started accelerating along the path towards moving things to the cloud, even though that's a trend that was already in motion well before COVID hit. But what do you see as having changed the most in the cloud versus on-prem versus hybrid discussion in the last 2.5 years? Rick?
Well, I think a lot of that's related to, the workforce, right? So, more locations, right? People in different locations, more disparate teams. You've got partners that are all over the world. You need cloud access somewhere. So let's say I open up a new office in, pick a city, and I don't have a data center there. I don't have an office there, but I most surely have some cloud access there. So those are the types of things that we've seen. We've seen things around speed, around I want it now. The timelines in terms of the end user is very demanding. They have a lot of options, and something that normally would take a year, you need to maybe get something up and running in 3 to 6 months. So those sort of things we're seeing. So fast and flexible has been really important. But then along with that, scalability, and how do you handle scalability? How can you predict? Cloud has helped there. And then the other thing we're seeing is multi-cloud as well as on-prem. Because some of our customers are worried about vendor lock, or they've chosen a couple of different clouds because Azure might do something. It might be something in the AI world that does better than Amazon, or vice versa. So they want some flexibility. And then some of you guys have experienced this as well. consolidation of media companies, right? Different clouds, different locations. How do I not disrupt all my workflows as I put these companies together? And then as we've seen that, we've also seen, and this is again, I'm not trying to pitch Signiant products, but one of the things that we've done is finding, once you start moving content and it's all over the place, how do you find it, right? And we had a case last year where we had a customer that was looking for some B-roll, and they knew they had it, they just couldn't find it. And the ability to actually search and locate this content across multiple clouds or across multiple data centers is hard to do. And those are things that we think are challenges, and some things that we're trying to address in the industry right now. So a lot of changes with COVID.
Anyone else want to chime in on that with the changes you've seen in the last 2.5 years?
I'll drop my 2 cents here. I think a lot of the changes that we've been able to make or seen as an industry is really utilizing cloud as a full production suite. Before it was really about like VOD transcode. It was really about putting playlists together and building kind of this rudimentary fast channel stuff. But with the way that the technology has advanced over the last 2.5 now almost 3 years now, like you can really run your 24/7 operations in cloud and not even think about your ground-based operations for the most part anymore, other than if you're doing live studio shows. So really, be able to, in 2020 to say that like Viz Trio could run in cloud was completely crazy town, right? It's putting graphics like that are very high motion outside of an HTML5 render was kind of, that was all space age, building space shuttles kind of technology at the time. Now it's like, it's an everyday thing. Like it's hard to walk around NEB and not see a vendor that's got basically some kind of support for cloud, whether it's graphics, comms, video switching, line records, asset management. Like it's all there, and the tools are just continuing to get better and better. So we're on a rocket ship to some degree, and it's just a matter of putting together those parts to make your workflow possible.
It sounds, Corey, like it's one thing that is happening with you is happening with us. It used to be in 2020, if we went and said we wanted to do a cloud project, it was a lot of discussion, right? It was someone said, "Oh, well, you better go talk to the cloud team." And there's this IT team that's kind of over here that maybe does cloud. And I think what's changed is that we have invested so much in reskilling our media engineering teams on cloud, because I want an engineer to be able to pivot from an on-site problem to an in-cloud problem and be able to solve equivalently without having to outsource that knowledge and that capability. So now it's gone from that to, hey, I've got a problem to solve, and cloud is an equal tool in the toolbox, and when we decide to do it, it just happens, right? There's not a lot of hoop jumping. In fact, there's probably less hoop jumping, because we go from budget approval to infrastructure as opposed to budget approval to design, procurement, shipping and receiving. This whole technology lifecycle, you sort of cut right to the chase. It's almost like you go from the conceptual diagram to the implementation super fast.
Yeah, I mean, you break down what would take months and months and months of planning and deployment down to days and weeks, and you make a great point about the broadcast engineering piece of it, because we've fundamentally have changed the way broadcast engineering actually functions, right? It's no longer the guy that understands SDI video and routing in a facility somewhere. We're now talking to the guys that used to do a podcast on Twitch, or the guys that are YouTube broadcasters, where these tools like OBS and XSplit and some of these vMix and whatnot, those were their tools of the trade. But because they were just online streamers, they didn't really get the kind of the accolades that they are getting today. So we're actually like focusing on trying to figure out like, how do we hire the best new world broadcast engineer? And those guys are 100% in the streaming space. These are the guys that understand IP in and out. They don't necessarily understand the SDI world, but they certainly understand like the new world of cloud-based television production, and they get it. The new broadcast engineers of the future are essentially our IT folks, and that fundamentally changes how we hire, how we staff.
I absolutely agree with you, Corey, on that. It is a totally different person that I'm hiring now. Totally different. Where before
Jeff,
I'd be like, did I
You
get
got a
that?
ton of background noise there.
Sorry about that. Flipped over. Just a second.
And now we can't hear you at all.
That should be better now. And sorry, it's a little fighting.
There we go. No,
actually,
actually the volume's better now, but you were
okay,
saying.
great. So I agree with Corey completely about that. Finding the right people, the right staff members is crucial right now. And to find people that understand what we're doing, both on the video production or audio production side, and also IT as deep as we need them to, that's the biggest challenge. And I'm looking in places I never in my wildest dreams thought I would look before. But I'm like, okay, so if you know that, you don't know anything about video, I can train that part. That's easy. We've got plenty of documentation. We've got plenty of ways to make that happen. But knowing how to manipulate cloud workflows and hybrid workflows and to link SRT streams and understand port forwarding and all that little stuff that I just take for granted now, the people that are coming into this space as engineers or people that want a job in this space, we have to be looking other places. And luckily it is those people that are like the streamers that have been playing around with OBS and vMix and all these things that are just training them up to be the next engineers and using the bigger tools.
Yeah, I would also say that a lot of the places where I've been able to find talent successfully over the years has been in esports, because in an esports world, your technology is really limitless, right? Your field of play is in a computer, if you will. It's a virtual playing field. It's a lot different in traditional sports. We actually have a venue in which is being in operation for a match of some kind, whether it's soccer, football, baseball, basketball, whatever it happens to be. In an esports world, you be completely 100% in this digital space, other than having a camera for your talent and stuff, and the talent can be anywhere. So from that standpoint, like a lot of the technology innovation, I think that has really exploded the last couple of years, a lot of that's been driven from the esports space. I mean, look at all of the top esports gaming companies out there, and they've done fantastic work in the cloud space.
We see as a software vendor, we see the same things in terms of building solutions, right? So we've done everything that we've looked at because it's actually aligns with what you guys are saying. We're seeing people that are out there that are they're writing scripts in Python or JavaScript. They understand webhooks, AWS Lambdas, that sort of thing. They may not have a strong media background. They may have some, but not a strong one, and they need to learn that. And those are the types of people that we're seeing that are using some of our tools like our APIs and our SDKs to sort of string some of this stuff together. Very different than it was 10 years ago. And these people, we're seeing them, a lot of them out of the media industry, but we've seen some of them come out of the large retail companies as well, which is really interesting because it's the same technology. They just don't have the media knowledge. So I don't know if you guys are seeing that, but that's some of the things we're seeing.
Absolutely. Well, that's where the IT workforce
Yep.
Is becoming the new broadcast engineer. The folks that we hire for these new media workflows that live in the cloud are really our future digital plumbers, if you will. Routing video is just an IP-based stream. It's fundamentally like something that is, from a mental construction standpoint, is totally like graspable by if that's even a word. I think you get what I mean, is that it's native to what they currently already understand about the way technology works.
We just have to teach them how to use a vector scope and a waveform. That's the biggest thing. This is what a legal video signal looks like, okay?
All right.
We've had good success training in both directions, really. We've got a lot of people that are traditional broadcast engineers that we've sent to countless, AWS training sessions and are really boned up on that stuff. And the opposite is certainly true. But one thing that we did early on is, it's so easy to spin up cloud infrastructure that you could very easily go from managing thousands of configuration items in your facility to managing millions in the cloud, right? And if you're not, I think, doing it with automation up front, you could get yourself into a lot of trouble really fast. And so one of the things that we set up as a cardinal rule, thou shalt not press the create instance button in the AWS console everything is Terraform, everything is cloud formation. And I should have seen it coming, but I kind of just realized all of our post engineers that are working in the cloud have turned into developers. That's what they're doing. They're writing code. And so it's just, what an amazing process this has been to watch that reskilling go on. And now I'm starting to think about needing to adopt software processes to manage that team, as opposed to more traditional engineering processes that we might have had in the past.
Yeah, there's a network engineer that we've been working with recently because we're redesigning some of our infrastructure in cloud, but he's a traditional network guy. He's big iron, Juniper, Cisco type stuff. And he's getting a kick out of being able to help out with the cloud environment because it's brand new territory for him. And he's actually out there building cloud formation scripts to run VPCs, And so to your point, I mean, it is a fantastic time right now to see the evolution of not only the technology, but also the people and just the new jobs that are being created out of this kind of digital revolution.
That's a great discussion, and that's one of the questions that we were going to get to later about how it's affected staffing and training. But I'm glad we got to it organically now, and it's fascinating to hear how things have changed. In the session description that was on the conference program, we kind of tried to debunk the myth that everything's going to the cloud, because not everything is going to the cloud, or even going hybrid. Although everyone is at least considering the cloud or hybrid for just about everything. But when decisions about cloud migration are being made, most often do you find that those decisions are use case driven? Are they connected to technical feasibility issues? Or are they based on more business financial considerations? I'd like to turn to you, Jeff, because you adopted cloud, or as you call them, distributed, and I like that term, workflows, more aggressively than just about anyone else we know on the production side.
I definitely think that most of our decisions probably start from the beginning as, does it make the most cost-effective sense also? We probably start there, but it's not for every application. I mean, you could always figure out a way to do it a different way. If you wanted to do it hybrid, going back to a colo or going back to our MCR, we could definitely do that. But it's so easy for us just to spin up our VPC or a different VPC and create our infrastructure there. And then I don't have to worry about punching holes in my firewalls and doing other things back at our normal MCR. The MCR is just controlling the VPC at that point. And for me, for the per machine $2 an hour or whatever it is that I'm using, it's just cost of doing business at that point. And it just makes it easier to have other people involved in our workflows, instead of me having to bring them back to a hybrid situation, bring them back to the MCR or a truck or something of that nature. It's always, we're sitting here at a university site. I fought with IT for 3 days to get port forwarding and open IPs and things like that. 3 days. I could have done it in 3 minutes on the cloud.
Right. I think though, for like a live sport type of workflow, it's going to be hard to get rid of trucks, and specifically trucks, because people are used to having that tier one kind of look and feel. They have physical infrastructure on the ground at the actual event, right? So things like Super Bowl and Wimbledon and stuff like that are always going to have this kind of tier one infrastructure deployed. What I hope happens from an industry perspective is that we're able to supplement what's actually on the ground with workflow and automation in the cloud, that we can bridge the two worlds together in a way where it actually makes sense. So it's actually complementary to what our ground operations folks are actually having to do, because we're tying in this huge amount of facility infrastructure that's not on site and making it available to the ground-based guys to be more effective in creating the product that's compelling to watch.
No, I agree completely with that. And that's how we got into cloud. That was exactly it. We were hitting a certain limit of what we could put in a truck and what we could staff in a truck because of what we were doing. But our clients wanted to see more content. They wanted to see we do a lot of professional tennis. So you mentioned Wimbledon, but that's not one of ours, but we do a lot of professional tennis. And so more equals more for everybody. They want to see more courts. They want to see more play. They want to see everything expanded. It's like, well, there's only X amount of space at a lot of these tournaments that we could put a truck or trucks, or there's just no compounds like you have at the really big shows. But because of the level of what we're doing, which is the Challenger circuit and the tour level on the ATP tour, because of that, we're able to go in and leverage SRT workflows, LRT workflows through LiveViews, other uplinks through Sienna, so that we can get that content up to the cloud and then do the mixing and do the graphics and do the replay and everything in the cloud without having to dedicate more space, because every inch here on a site is valuable to that tournament. They don't want all these trucks lined up and backed up. They want to have to deal with just one vendor, but they still want more content. So that's exactly what we're doing, is just giving it more. But by leveraging the cloud infrastructure, we can give it more at a more cost-effective way.
I think one of the things, I think we're also very, cost-driven when we look at cloud, and we started to create some models that helped us to do that. It was interesting when we really started peeking into it. It's not just the comparison of the straight up procurement of the tech to, whatever the cost of the cloud is over X number of years, whatever your depreciation period would be on that CapEx spend. But, then we started peeling back the software maintenance agreements and the system maintenance agreements and the amount of people's time that goes towards that, the power and the rack space and the value of that, real estate, that technical real estate that's required, and adding up the fraction of people's time that it takes to do the whole kind of procurement, commissioning, integration, workflows, and all that kind of stuff. And when you really got to the end of that, it was shockingly expensive what one RU in your data center actually costs. And I think that we added that up, and our eyes were kind of popping, because we'd actually never done that before, because we never had to. And having that number of an average cost of one RU of high density data center compared to something in the cloud made it actually really a pretty straightforward calculation for us to say, well, here's a cloud system. If we had on-prem, it would be this many RU of stuff. We could pretty quickly come to a return on investment. And, I think we probably around 2020 started seeing that needle flip over, and things started to actually be more cost effective cloud side. And also there's a lot less cash out the door on day one, because you're only getting in for that year's cost. And then if the business needs to pivot at some point, they don't have to figure out they're making this gigantic bet all at once, So, but I think absolutely it's been a very financially driven exercise. And I think as time goes on, it's less and less a question of feasibility. We know we can do it.
Yeah, but it's also about content, right? To Jeff's point, and Michael, where your world is at, content is king. The more content you can create, the more eyeballs you can attract, et cetera, et cetera. But in a cloud-based model, now we can play with those fast channels and spin them up, spin them down, and see what it resonates with our content ads. Over the last couple of years, we've really retrained people that streaming is where to consume a majority of your content. It leads to reason that if I can, pull down an entire television network's video streaming, from either Cox or Comcast or whoever it happens to be, I don't have to be at home anymore. I can be on the go consuming whatever media I want when I want. And it the pandemic has accelerated the explosion of the need to have multiple content deals out there structured, because you're trying to get that audience. And the explosion of the plus apps that are out there is a prime example of content not catching up from a pipelining perspective to the appetite of the consumer. So we're really kind of retraining some of the consumers as well in how they're consuming media.
Rick, you're coming at it from a different perspective than our other speakers. What are you hearing as the most important decision drivers when people decide to go cloud versus hybrid versus on-prem?
Yeah, I think definitely a different perspective from the other folks on the phone here, or on the call here. I sort of see it, and we sort of hear, it's really a trade-off between predictable costs and agility. right? Which one is it that you're looking for? And again, listen to what Michael had to say. You start doing the math on the predictable costs versus the cloud costs. Let's not forget, when you have something that you're going to do on-prem, you need to purchase that you have to purchase that hardware, you need to purchase that software, you need to back it up, all that sort of stuff has to happen. So when you start looking at that, it's sometimes tough, but what cloud is going to give you is going to give you a lot of agility, a lot more agility than you'll get on premise. So that's what we're hearing. We're seeing a lot of agility, but also people interested in agility, but also pretty cautious about the costs that aren't fixed. So there is definitely some concerns there. They don't want to get a surprise bill that says, "Oh my God, I had no idea." And so those are things that you have to watch for. And one of the things we did as we built product, we built everything we're doing now is SaaS. We built it in a multi-tenant standpoint, so we know it's a lot easier for us to see what our costs are. We get great pricing from the cloud vendors because we spend a lot of money with them, and it allows us to pass some of those savings on and have a competitive pricing to our customers when we do that. So those are some of the things we did when we built the product out. We took advantage of those of the cloud costs because of the volume. So we got some pretty good volume rates. The other thing we've done is, and we'll continue to do, is around things like with one of the acquisitions we just did, we're going to start offering the ability to create clips, mark in, mark out, without actually pulling the content out of the cloud. So if you have the heavyweight professional assets in the cloud, you can create clips and pull them down, only pull what you need. So you save a lot in your egress costs, because egress can be very, very expensive. So those are some of the use cases that we're starting to work on with some of our newer technology. So those are things that we're seeing in the market, and we're seeing, we are definitely seeing more of a push towards cloud, but I don't think it's going to be 100%.
Let's talk a little bit about data. I think back to something that Jason Tebow, who's the executive director of the Streaming Video Technology Alliance, said years ago at a streaming media conference. He reminded us that when video is streaming, it's just data, but everything up until that point, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, wasn't just data. Now it is, or it's getting closer there, right? You talk about broadcast engineers are becoming developers. What role does data play in decisions about cloud workflows? Where does that data come from, and what does that data tell us? Michael, can we start with you on that?
I guess I have a couple different ways of looking at that. One is that I think there's a principle which holds pretty true with cloud called data gravity, and that idea is that if you have a large amount of data, it's probably easier to locate your compute and other resources close to that data. Then it's going to attract them rather than move that data around a network, right? And so I think where we have situations where content is originating in the cloud, or it's egressing from the cloud, or maybe both, those are obvious places where we're starting to look and say, well, maybe instead of bringing that information back down to an on-prem environment, maybe it's better to just leave it in the cloud. Right. And that way we can kind of cluster the networking, the compute, along with the storage that's in the cloud. And, it saves a lot of, wasted movement of material. So I think that's one way to look at it. I think the other way to look at it, is the way that we can, I guess, instrument and measure things differently in the cloud. Like when my cloud security dashboard just works because it's in the cloud. The cloud infrastructure describes itself to me, and the scale of usage is there. All of my configuration is there, and it's presented to me in a data dashboard. And that whole process is very, very time consuming to try to get data on my on-prem utilization and security status and all that other kind of stuff. We have to put a lot of systems in place for that. So I think the fact that you might want to co-locate your compute and network with your data can drive you towards a cloud-oriented solution or away from it. But also the fact that there is such a proliferation of data about your cloud environment helps you to be a lot more efficient, I think, than you could be in a similar on-prem environment.
There's definitely all kinds of different data that can be collected. And to Michael, to your point, like it doesn't make sense to move petabytes worth of data back to the ground just to analyze it there. You might as well do it in cloud. And that could be any data that's coming from your clients that are used to consume your video programming and your content, to improve quality of service, find metrics about where in the world the majority of people are coming from, where are your hot regions versus cold regions. You can kind of analyze to improve your service from a streaming perspective, like figure out like, hey, I'm dark in these particular areas, or I'm not seeing very good performance in these particular areas. Now it gives me as a business the opportunity to go out and solve those problems in a more strategic way, if you will. And again, that helps focus the dollars because we're displacing it from some of the CapEx. So we're still spending it, it's just moving to different buckets. But a lot of the data analytics is what cloud is really good at, right? To Michael's point, I have a whole dashboard full of stuff. So my InfoSec guys and my other IT, DevOps personnel has a one kind of look and feel of the entire environment without having to bounce into different systems like we have kind of on the ground today, whether it was SolarWinds or other type of dashboards that do health telemetry across my environment. And I'm going to inherently miss certain elements of my infrastructure on ground just because I never thought about it. In the cloud, it's all pretty much plumbed up. When you fire up an AMI off of a machine image to build compute, it comes dialed in with all those hooks and ladders. So I can do my business analytics, I can do performance improvement on my service itself, and I can find out more information about my customers to make a better quality experience for them.
We look at it the same way that Corey just explained from a vendor standpoint. We use the data to look at health, to spin up instances or spin them down to be cost effective. Know where it's hot, know where it's cold, as you guys mentioned. And then, again, we're, part of the ways that we make money is we move data, but we agree with you, only move what's necessary, right? Because it's just, it doesn't make sense. Why would you, especially with the egress costs, if you don't need to move it on-prem, don't do it. Or, you only move what you need. So I think the data is really important it's part of the analytics. I think it's really important whether you're providing a service or you're providing a product as a service. I think it's really important, and the cloud gives you the ability to get that.
Let's talk about economics some more, even though you've touched on it at various points during the conversation. Cloud economics is a complex and challenging topic to understand and plan for. So what are some approaches for managing the economics of taking advantage of cloud capabilities and, hopefully having a better handle on controlling your cloud costs? Rick, can we start with you on that?
That's a good question. I think really it comes down to only move what's necessary. And again, I think, one of the things we're doing is we've got a product or a service called Media Engine, which give the ability to only pull down, create your clips, mark your content out, create your clips, and only pull down what's necessary. You don't have to pull the entire asset down. So that's one area where you can certainly save a lot of money. I think that those are really the things that I can come up with in terms of how do we approach this? I think again, because of the way we built our product, we're getting economies of scale. And because there's a lot of volume that we're moving.
One thing I would say about cloud economics is that, in traditional production, there's a lot of, decisions that you have to make about the cost of production. There's, am I going to roll a truck? How many people am I going to fly to crew that truck? What are my lines going to cost, right? Maybe I've got satellite or fiber that I'm pulling out to bring signals back to home base. On the news side, am I going to fly correspondents out to this thing? Am I going to send a flyaway dish? I mean, we always are making these sort of production decisions. How many editors am I going to staff up around that event? And I think what cloud gives us the opportunity to do is to align the actual tech infrastructure with the actual thing that is being produced, right? So along with that is, and I'm going to need a cloud-based video switcher, and I'm going to need 4 cloud editors, and I'm going to, and I'm only going to need them as long as it's there, and it becomes an expense of the production. And I think actually we've had to create these really bizarre structures in our companies to deal with the heavyweight expense of capitalized infrastructure that supports production. And I'm almost like, wait, hold on, rewind. Let's go back and strip all that stuff out and go back and make this a production expense that the production finance groups are in control of. And then I think that it's that second thing that happens after that is starting to develop what a lot of people are calling FinOps or financial operations. You heard DevOps, there's FinOps. And FinOps is really your internal financial team's ability to start to look at that production-driven expense and start to budget for it in a similar way that they would budget for any other production, and to be able to control that expense so it doesn't get out of hand. So definitely a different way of thinking about it, and some different muscles that we need to build financially.
Right. So like, it's almost like financially being able to look at the world in a different set of lenses, where you can actually right size kind of your production needs. Like, do you always need a truck? Do you need a flyaway kit for satellite backhaul? Like, I think there's a lot of venues that are heavily investing in IP based connectivity. And so, does your $50,000 a day truck turn into a $5,000 flight pack? And do you send out a crew of 2 or 3 people to put up your cameras and other infrastructure at the venue itself? You got your talent that flies in, but you can switch all that stuff in the cloud, because you're really doing the show for the people watching at home. You're not building the show for the people in the stadium. So it's really kind of like changing the optics of like, hey, does the product look good on air? Great. I don't need all this heavy infrastructure unless it's an insurance policy and other things that come in from a financial perspective, like it can't fail events, right? Like, take example, like any large tier 1 sporting event or news event around the world, those are never fail type of events that you would probably roll a truck because you're more comfortable with that. But if you can right size the financial exposure of that, you're really building the show for the people in the audience. You're not really building it for anybody in the venue. So you can get away with paring down and right sizing your infrastructure. And that's what cloud allows us to do.
Yeah. And even on a tier 1 event, you still probably are going to say, hey, I'd like to go ahead and budget for this much super slow-mo processing in the cloud from my EVS system. And that just goes into the line item expense for the production team that's planning their production budget for the coming year.
I find it, at least in our world, it's definitely a lot easier to make those budgets up, because I know exactly what the costs are per hour. I know exactly what the costs are per day. It's just so much simpler to spin up what we need. And if we need, the thing for us is like, if I need another operator, for me to fly in an EVS or fly in a 3-play to put in a truck because I needed 4 more channels, I could do it in seconds in the cloud, and there it is. It's ready to go. So for us, it's that ability to easily grow and add an expense into it, but also get something out of it. Or if we needed another output that needed to go for a separate branding to a separate zone, then I could easily do that in the cloud in seconds, minutes at most, versus having to worry about, does that switcher that's on the truck, does it have enough auxes? Do I have an ability? Do I need another CG to be able to run another graphics package on it? I can be more fluid in the cloud, and I know exactly what those expenses are going to be, faster to be able to hand it off to my clients and say, this is what it'll take.
And that's a great point as well, in terms of the global distribution, the repackaging in cloud, and the expense that you would have to typically, like if you were backhauling to a facility and you were localizing all your content, graphics packages, talent, captions, all of that stuff, that's a significant expense. If you move that workflow to the cloud, now all of a sudden I take one feed in, I can globalize that across all of my output distributions to every global territory that I run and manage, because the AI tools for captioning are pretty good. I can get talent to jump in on a ICAP kind of integration, and they can basically localize the content UN style on the fly. And all I'm doing is remixing, repackaging that in the cloud, and I can redistribute to 17 different regions in that way from a single source, which in a facility operations, that would be a huge lift.
Wonderful. Our last question, as I said, was going to be about staffing decisions and how that's all changed. I think we covered that pretty well earlier on in the discussion. One thing I don't think we've touched on, though, and there are a couple of questions from the audience about it, is resiliency. And could you talk about what sort of resiliency models you're using? Is it, multiple availability zones, load balancing? How does it, how do those decisions change? Or how do the answers change when it's cloud versus on-prem versus hybrid? If
There's
one
a
of you
pain
wants to
point.
jump in, go ahead.
There's a pain point for everybody, right? And it always comes to pretty much everything that we addressed. It always comes down to what does it cost, because that's where the pain point is going to start. If it just costs a little bit more, yeah, let's go ahead and make those backups in a different way. For us, we're heavy in AWS, but as everybody knows around here, AWS has some challenges at times. Availability of machines, for instance, that was a major thing for us back in December. G4s just did not exist in Virginia, so we had to move to other places. And yeah, they're still a little hot in places, but we're distributing our workflow within AWS, multiple data centers, even around the world for that matter. But we're also at the same time leveraging, if it is an event that it matters to the client, that we need that backup and they want to see that resiliency, then we'll move to multiple clouds and we'll move to colos. I mean, it's just another line item. This is where it is. Okay, how much does it hurt? Okay, give me it is, and then we'll put it into place. But yeah, you have to plan on different data centers, and we have a proof of concept that we worked with the Sienna Group and worked in. It's basically using their routers and their processing engines where everything was tied into multiple zones back and forth, and with fallovers and everything, it was super resilient. And that was one of the things that we had to put it in place to prove it to some of the old broadcast people, because they expected to have that same kind of resiliency they would have on a truck. But it always comes down to, it's like, do you have two routers in a truck? Most of the time, no. But they never fail. Right. Okay. I've been by that truck that I've had a 256 do. So exactly. So for me in the cloud, you can build that infrastructure as far as you want to. You can build that flip over and fail over infrastructure as far as you want to, as long as it's cost effective. It makes sense to do it. Sometimes though, it's very easy to get more complex in that workflow than you need to be. So there's always that side of it too.
So we have from a SaaS service, we have what we call a SRE team, site reliability engineering team. Some would call it DevOps. So we have a DevOps team that is running, we're running multiple regions, and we run load balancing, and we're using third-party tools, Datadog and the like. So we know, we can see the health. And we've had cases where Amazon went down in certain regions, we just flipped them over and our customers didn't even know. Right, so that you have to have that stuff built in place. You need a backup.
That's a great place to end. Unfortunately, we do have more audience questions that we didn't have time for, but that was a great discussion, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Our Amazon gift card winner for this session is Fernando Campagnoli. So Fernando, keep your eye out on your email next week and you'll get an email with that information. Thanks again to Signiant for sponsoring this panel, and to Media Silo for sponsoring this entire week's worth of sessions. In a half hour, we've got a couple of tech talks coming from, one from Evertz talking about SaaS services for monetization, and the other from Dolby looking at the building blocks of the metaverse. So good stuff, and I'll see you in about a half hour. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.